So you just bought a handful of new gravers and you don't know what to do with them yet? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to show you the tools and techniques needed to get your gravers sharp and ready for work. One common mistake I often see from beginners is that they'll order up their first gravers from the supply house, and because they feel sharp from the package, they imagine that they're ready to cut with. And that couldn't be any further from the truth. All gravers need further preparation before they're ready to cut metal. And in today's episode, we're going to cover 3 different methods for sharpening your gravers, starting with the most basic, which is a simple bench stone like this, and nothing but hand-eye coordination. Moving on up to a modern sharpening fixture like this GRS Apex Dual Angle fixture that will give you repeatable results every time. So let's take a look at those 3 different methods, and you can decide which one's right for you. Alright, to start out today's quick tip, we're going to go over a bit of terminology. A lot of beginning engravers get these two confused. It may look silly, but this is a graver and this is an engraver, and they're not the same. The graver is the tool that the engraver uses to cut metal. And so now that we've got those two down, let's take a look at the graver and its parts. We'll use a basic square graver as our example here. So on your normal square graver, you'll have 3 facets cut. If this is the top, the facet here is the face, and that face is cut at about a 45-degree angle. And the next facet that you'll see on the graver is the heel. The heel facets are on either side of the tip on the belly or bottom of the graver. And those heels provide a couple of different functions. And let's take a look at what that does. So when you order gravers, quite often they'll show up in the mail, and a lot of beginners think that they're ready to use because they feel sharp on the points. But if you try to use this graver as it sits, it'll simply want to dig into the surface of the metal and just get stuck. It'll just keep digging deeper and deeper as you push harder. So in order to get around that, we need to add one more surface to that graver, and that is the heels. The heels provide a couple of functions. The first is they provide lift. Those heels are cut at about 15 degrees, and that allows the graver to lift up enough to accommodate our fingers underneath it. The second purpose those heels serve is they act as a bearing surface. So instead of the graver wanting to dig straight into the metal, now the graver will enter the metal and glide along until you're ready to pop the chip out. So that's your basic standard graver. But there's one other type of graver that's often used these days, and we'll take a look at it as well. And that's called a parallel heel engraver. And the difference is that the heels on the parallel heel graver run the entire width of the bottom. And they have a few advantages over standard gravers. As you're going around corners, you'll sometimes encounter something called heel drag, where the outside facet of the heel will create little scallops on the outside of the cut, and that's called heel drag. Well, parallel heel gravers tend to minimize heel drag, so they're a great geometry to use. It's pretty much the standard geometry that I use. So let's go over to the sharpening bench and take a look at how those different geometries are cut. We're going to show you 3 different ways of cutting engravers, using basic bench stones on up to modern sharpening fixtures. Alright, to get started with our basic sharpening method here, we'll need a few simple tools to start. A couple of bench stones, one coarse and one fine. In my case, I'm using diamond plate stones. This one is about 600 and this one is about 1,000 or 1,200. I'm not really sure. You can also get a fine ruby stone if you want to further polish your heels. It doesn't need to be an expensive one. The next thing you'll want is a length of 1/8 inch steel rod, and then a 10 power jeweler's loop to inspect the heels as you cut them. I also like to keep a piece of copper plate on the bench just to test out the graver and make sure everything's running true after I cut the heels. So we'll start with a basic square graver and our coarse stone. Now I've already prepped this by grinding the face to about 45 degrees. It's not really critical. As long as it's between 45 and 50 degrees, that's just fine. The first thing that I'm going to want to do is to place the graver in my hand. I like to rest it against my pinky and lock it in place with my 3 fingers and thumb, and then rest the heel of my hand on the bench with the graver on top of the stone, and I'm simply going to rub back and forth, maintaining that 45-degree angle. The critical part here is to try and maintain the angle as firmly as you can. From there, I'm going to switch over to my fine stone. I'm going to check against my thumbnail that I've got a nice sharp tip, and I do. Now we're going to polish the heels. I'm going to set my steel rod on top of the bench stone, and I'm simply going to hold a length of the tip out about 3/4 of an inch, rest my thumbs against the rod, set the graver on top, and lay it down until it's touching the bench stone, and make a few passes back and forth. And then inspect it under the loop. And that looks nice. Now I'll switch to the other side and make a few more passes. Check it again. That looks good. Let's see how it's cutting. And that's running true. And it's as simple as that. Now you'll want to experiment a little bit, depending on whether you're cutting by hand using a graver like this, or whether you're cutting with hammer and chisel. You may want to play with your geometry and adjust your angles to suit you. I'll do the same thing with this handheld graver. First I'll face it off by locking it in my hand. I've got a nice flat face. And then dress my heels. And that's running true. Now you'll know if you didn't cut a good heel because a couple of things will happen. The graver might skitter off to one side or the other as you're driving it through the metal, or it might tear the metal on one side or the other. You'll want a nice clean cut with a nice curl of metal coming off the tip. And that's as simple as that. Let's take a look at what that heel looks like under magnification. Again, this is about a 1/3 to 1/2 millimeter heel. And here's what that looks like as it's cutting through a sheet of copper. You can see the lift that it provides. Okay, for our second method, we're going to use a fixture that some people say is nothing more than a glorified doorstop, but this is what I started with. It was the first fixture I had of any kind. It's called a Crocker Sharpener, and they actually work quite well. It simply locks the graver into the fixture with a thumb screw, and you have two adjustments really. You have face angle, and then you have heel angle. So the first thing we'll do is get our graver straight in the fixture and lock down. Now the fixture does have some little hash marks, but there's really no reference mark as to what is perfectly straight. So you'll just have to eyeball that yourself. The next thing we'll do is set the graver down and adjust our angle for the face and lock it down. I'll take the coarse stone and holding the fixture like so, I'll rub the face. Now the nice thing about the Crocker, as opposed to doing this by hand, is that you can see it maintains the correct attitude for the graver. You don't have to worry about that. I'll switch to the fine stone. Check my face, and we look good. From there, you can rotate the graver. We're going to switch over to the belly and lay our graver down at about a 15-degree angle. Once again, we're just eyeballing this. Perfect geometry is not crucial here. I have to set this one a little steeper because this is a curved tip graver. And we're going to quickly sharpen one heel. Then we'll flip it to the other side. And sharpen the second heel. That looks nice. I'm going to leave it in the fixture. Turn this vertical and check the heel. And that's cutting nicely. And that's all there is to the Crocker. It's a really simple fixture. There's not much to it. Like I say, just a couple of adjustments. And it's fairly bomb-proof. Now, one thing you can do if you want to make things a little bit more repeatable, would be to grind or mark these little hashes on the side with some kind of special mark, either with paint or with a graver, so that you know you're repeating the same angles time and time again. And that's that. So this works for different types of engravers. You can use flats, squares, just about anything in it. Another nice thing about it, if you're using GRS tools, you can also lock a collet in the tool and sharpen your tools that way without having to remove it from the collet. They're inexpensive and they're readily available at just about every jewelry supply house. So before we move to our next sharpening method, let's take a look at the belly of that graver next to a ruler. These are millimeter hash marks, and that's about a 1/2 millimeter heel. Now for our third and most modern sharpening method, we'll be discussing the new GRS Dual Angle Apex sharpening fixture, and it has a number of unique features. If you're already a GRS tool user, you're probably using these quick change collets that can go from your handpiece and your Engraver Max or other pneumatic tool over to these manual handles like this. And the wonderful thing about the Apex is that you can remove the collet in its entirety and place it into the fixture without having to remove the graver itself. The next unique thing about this tool is this set of sleeves that it includes. Each sleeve is marked with a different graver geometry that it's designed to cut. And around the circumference of it, you'll see a number of hash marks, each mark with heel, shape, or face for the different facet that you're going to cut. So to demonstrate that tool today, I'm going to take a fresh graver that's never been shaped before, and we're going to shape it from start to finish so I can show you how the tool works. So to start out, we'll place the tool in the fixture, and the first thing we'll want to do is shape the belly facets. And so you can see on the circumference there's a label marked shape with a corresponding hash mark, and we'll lock the tool onto that. Also, next to where it says shape is marked 2.5, and that tells us how many degrees we need to set the body of the fixture to. And there's a corresponding hash mark on this wheel on the side. So we'll start by shaping a belly facet, and we're going to be using the rotary sharpening wheel for that. And we'll be starting with the coarse stone here, so it doesn't take very long. Now after we've shaped one side, we'll switch it over to the opposite side. And shape that. And that's all there is to it. I'm going to remove my coarse wheel. And I'm going to touch these up on a finer wheel. now the belly of the graver is pre-shaped and ready to go. From there, we're going to spin the wheel around to where it's marked face, and it says 45 degrees next to that, and so we'll adjust the body to 45 degrees. You could also set that at 50 degrees or even 60 degrees if you're cutting different metal, if you want a steeper face on your graver. And we're going to remove my medium wheel. Now we're down to the 1200 grit wheel. And our face is cut. I'll spin the graver back around to where it's marked heel. It also says 15 degrees. So we'll set our body at 15 degrees. I'll touch the heel. I'll go to the opposite side. Touch the heel. And for the heels, that's really all it takes. Just a quick swipe. I'll inspect the heel with the loop. Everything is nice and even. And that's all there is to it. Like I said, it's a really wonderful fixture. You've got a lot of different options here. If you don't want to use the geometries that are listed on these 3 sleeves, you have the 360 degree sleeve that you can create just about any geometry you would like. The dual angle fixture also comes set up so that you can use it with any graver. This one is set up to work with quick change collets, but it's sold in a number of different configurations. So let's take a look at what a parallel heel graver looks like from its belly. Here you can see the heels extend the entire length of the side. And here's what that tool looks like when it's cutting metal. Again, you can see the heels run the entire length of the side of the belly. So for one last demonstration here, I want to show you how this works if you were needed to touch up a graver quickly. Let's say we've got a 105 here, and I've just broken the point, and I need to touch that up. I typically go straight to the face, automatically go to 45 degrees, touch up the face, I rotate to heel, go to 15 degrees, rotate to the opposite heel, touch it up, check my heels, and I'm good to go. Place my tool back in the handpiece, and I'm ready to cut. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something today. If you take away anything from this, it should be that sharp gravers is the single most important key to successful results. Graver geometry is really secondary to that. As an apprentice, I can remember we learned to sharpen everything by hand-eye coordination alone, and as long as I was getting good results, I was happy with what I had. And that's really all that matters. I couldn't tell you what graver geometry I was using at the time though. So as a beginner, I'd suggest you find something you like, whether it's a 90 or 120 degree, and stick with it for a while until you venture out and try some other things. If you make one investment as a beginner, I'd suggest looking for a sharpening fixture like this. The investment will pay for itself many times down the road. And speaking of sharpening fixtures, I'll be doing a full review of this GRS Apex Dual Angle sharpening fixture in a future episode. You can find that tool at www.grs.com. So until then, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification button so you'll know when that video is available, and keep your graver sharp, have fun at the bench, And as always, thanks for watching.